Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the UES Discovery, watching the stars through the main viewport. The research vessel had been exploring the outer edges of known space for 3 months now. His crew of 50 scientists and military personnel had discovered 2 new planets and mapped several star systems that no human had ever seen before. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and life support systems. Communications Officer Lisa Martinez worked at her station, scanning radio frequencies for any signs of intelligent life. Chief Science Officer Dr. Paul Henderson reviewed data from their latest planetary survey. Navigator Tom Brady plotted their course to the next system. Suddenly, Lisa Martinez straightened in her chair. Her fingers flew across her control panel as she adjusted the signal reception equipment. She pressed her earpiece closer and frowned with concentration. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on the long-range array," she said. "It's definitely artificial, but the pattern is unlike anything we've seen before." Jake Morrison walked over to her station. "Can you clean it up?" Lisa worked for several minutes, filtering out background noise and cosmic interference. Slowly, a clear signal emerged from the static. The transmission consisted of mathematical sequences followed by what sounded like spoken language, though the words were completely alien. "Dr. Henderson, I need you to look at this," Captain Morrison called. The science officer hurried over and listened to the signal. His eyes widened as he heard the mathematical patterns. "Captain, this is definitely from an intelligent species. The math is sophisticated, far beyond what we'd expect from a species just learning to use radio. Can we decode the message?" Dr. Henderson nodded. "The mathematical sequences appear to be a translation key. Give me a few hours with the computer." "Captain." Morrison returned to his chair and activated the ship's intercom. "All senior staff report to the briefing room in 1 hour. We may have made first contact with an alien species." 3 hours later, the senior staff gathered around the briefing room table. Dr. Henderson had worked with the ship's computer to decode the alien message. His face was grim as he prepared to share the translation. "The message is a distress call," he began. "It comes from something called the Zephyrian Alliance. They're asking for help from what they call the species from the 3rd planet of Sol. They know about Earth and they know about us." Security Chief Colonel Ryan Tucker leaned forward. "How is that possible? We've only had faster-than-light travel for 5 years." "Apparently, we've already made an impression on the galactic community," Dr. Henderson replied. "The message describes humans as survivors from a death world. They've heard stories about us." Chief Medical Officer Dr. Nina Ross spoke up. "What kind of help are they asking for?" Dr. Henderson activated the main display screen. The translated message appeared in English text. "They're being attacked by something called the hegemony. 3 different alien species have formed an alliance for mutual protection, but they're losing the war. Their planets are being conquered one by one." Captain Morrison read through the message carefully. The Zephyrians described systematic attacks on their worlds. The enemy took prisoners for slave labor and destroyed anyone who resisted. The Alliance had lost 18 star systems in just 3 months. They're offering us their star charts and advanced technology in exchange for military assistance, Dr. Henderson continued. "They say they've tried asking other species for help, but no one will fight the hegemony." Communications Officer Lisa Martinez had been monitoring the signal. "Captain, the message is repeating every 6 hours. It's being broadcast on multiple frequencies toward our solar system." Colonel Tucker studied the tactical information in the message. "This hegemony sounds like a serious threat. If they're expanding this quickly, they might eventually reach human space." Dr. Nina Ross raised a concern. "We don't know anything about these aliens. They could be trying to trick us into a conflict that's none of our business." Captain Morrison considered all the information. "Dr. Henderson, how accurate are the star charts they're offering?" "I've compared them to our own surveys. The areas we've explored match perfectly. The charts show star systems we haven't even discovered yet. This information would advance human exploration by decades." The captain made his decision. "Lisa, open a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. We need to speak with Admiral Susan Clark immediately." The transmission to Earth would take several hours to reach the Sol system. While they waited for a response, the Discovery's crew continued analyzing the alien message. Dr. Henderson worked with the linguistics computer to learn more about the Zephyrian language. The aliens seemed to have 3 different languages in their alliance, suggesting they were truly a coalition of separate species. Security Chief Colonel Tucker reviewed the military information in the message. The hegemony appeared to use conventional space warfare tactics. They attacked with large fleets and overwhelmed their enemies through superior numbers. Their ground forces were described as brutal, but not particularly sophisticated. When Admiral Clark's response finally arrived, her image appeared on the main screen of the briefing room. The Admiral was a veteran of the Solar Wars and had commanded Earth's defense forces for over a decade. "Captain Morrison, I've reviewed your preliminary report," Admiral Clark said. "This is exactly the kind of situation we've been preparing for. The Earth Defense Council has been debating when and how to become involved in galactic affairs. What are your orders, Admiral?" "I'm mobilizing the 3rd Fleet for immediate deployment. 12 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyers, and support vessels. I'll be commanding from the UES Defiance. Your mission is to proceed to Zephyrian space and establish contact. We need detailed intelligence about the situation before our main force arrives." Captain Morrison felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. Humanity was about to enter its first interstellar war. "There's one more thing, Captain," Admiral Clark continued. "The Defense Council has approved the use of our most advanced weapons and tactics. These aliens asked for help from Deathworlders. We're going to show them exactly what that means." The transmission ended and the briefing room fell silent. Everyone understood the significance of what was happening. Humanity had spent centuries fighting wars on Earth, developing military technology and tactics in an environment that would kill most other species. Now they would use that experience to help aliens they had never met fight an enemy they had never seen. Captain Morrison stood up. "Tom, plot a course for the coordinates in the Zephyrian message, maximum speed. Lisa, send our response to the alien transmission. Tell them help is coming." The UES Discovery changed course toward unknown space, carrying humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien species. Behind them, the most powerful military force Earth had ever assembled was preparing for war among the stars. The UES Discovery dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian territory. Captain Jake Morrison immediately ordered all sensors to maximum range. What they found shocked the entire crew. Hundreds of ships filled the space around them, but these were not warships. They were civilian vessels of every size and shape imaginable. Some looked like they had never been designed for space travel. Others appeared to be cargo ships hastily converted to carry passengers. "Captain, I'm reading massive life signs from these vessels," Dr. Nina Ross reported from her medical station. "Some of these ships are carrying far more people than they were built for." Communications Officer Lisa Martinez worked frantically at her console. "I'm receiving dozens of signals on the frequency from the original message. They're all speaking different languages, but the computer is starting to translate." The translations that came through painted a desperate picture. The ships were refugee fleets from multiple star systems. Families had abandoned their homes with only what they could carry. Many of the messages were pleas for food, medical supplies, and safe places to land. "There's a large vessel approaching our position," Navigator Tom Brady announced. "It's 3 times the size of anything else out here." Captain Morrison studied the approaching ship on the main screen. It looked like it was made of crystal and metal fused together. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that almost seemed like breathing. "Incoming transmission, Captain," Lisa Martinez said. "It's using the same translation protocol as the original distress call. Put it through." The main screen flickered and showed the interior of the alien ship. Captain Morrison tried not to show his surprise at what he saw. The being speaking to them looked like it was made of living crystal. Its body was roughly humanoid but translucent, with light moving through it like blood through veins. "I am Vessel Leader Thys of the Zephyrian Alliance," the alien said. The translation made its voice sound hollow and musical. "Are you truly from the 3rd planet of Sol? Are you the Deathworld survivors we have heard about?" Captain Morrison stepped forward. I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Ship Discovery. We received your distress call and came to help. The crystal being's entire body seemed to pulse with brighter light. You came. We sent the message hoping but not believing. Most species consider the stories about your world to be myths. Dr. Paul Henderson approached the screen, fascination overcoming his caution. Can you tell us about your situation? We need to understand what we're dealing with. Vessel leader Thys gestured with arms that looked like they were carved from living gemstone. The view changed to show star charts and tactical displays. The hegemony began their expansion 6 months ago. They call themselves the rightful rulers of the galaxy. They attack without warning and show no mercy. The tactical display showed the progression of the hegemony's conquest. System after system fell in rapid succession. The alien explained that the enemy used overwhelming force against planets that had never known real warfare. We tried to negotiate. Thys continued. The 3 species of our alliance believed we could find peaceful solutions, but the hegemony does not negotiate. They want slaves and territory. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Nina Ross had been studying the biological readings from the alien ship. Captain, I need to speak with you privately. They moved to a corner of the bridge where Dr. Ross could whisper her concerns. The life signs I'm reading from these ships are extremely fragile. Their immune systems appear to be almost non-existent by our standards. A common cold virus could kill them. Captain Morrison understood the implications. Is that why no other species has offered military help? Probably. Most galactic species evolved on worlds with stable environments. They never had to develop resistance to disease and environmental hazards like we did on Earth. They returned to the conversation with vessel leader Thys. Captain Morrison asked about the enemy's military capabilities. The hegemony is led by a species called the Krex, Thys explained. They are predators from a world with higher gravity than most. They conquered their neighboring systems long ago and have been expanding ever since. The alien showed them images of Krex soldiers. They looked like a cross between reptiles and insects with thick armor plating and multiple arms. They were clearly built for combat, but even they looked fragile compared to humans. They use fear as their primary weapon, Thys continued. Most species surrender after seeing what happens to those who resist. They bombard planets from orbit, then send ground forces to collect survivors. Security Chief Colonel Ryan Tucker had been studying the tactical information. How large are their fleets? The main battle fleet has over 200 ships. They also have garrison forces on conquered worlds and supply convoys. We estimate they have at least 400 vessels in total. Dr. Paul Henderson looked concerned. That's 8 times larger than our response fleet. Vessel leader Thys seemed to sense their worry. But you are from the Deathworld. The stories say your people can survive conditions that would kill any other known species. Is this true? Captain Morrison thought about Earth's harsh environment. Deadly storms, poisonous animals, disease, radiation, and natural disasters that could devastate entire continents. Humanity had evolved to survive all of it. Our world is dangerous, he admitted. But that made us tough. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. The crystal alien's body pulsed brighter. The hegemony has never faced serious military resistance. They expect their enemies to surrender after the first battle. Communications Officer Lisa Martinez interrupted the conversation. Captain, I'm getting reports from the refugee ships. The hegemony fleet is only 2 weeks away from this position. Vessel leader Thys confirmed the bad news. This is our final gathering point. If we cannot make a stand here, the Alliance will be completely destroyed. Captain Morrison made contact with Admiral Susan Clark to report the situation. The Earth fleet was still 5 days away. Even when they arrived, they would be heavily outnumbered. Admiral, these aliens are nothing like we expected, he reported. They're completely unprepared for warfare. The enemy has been winning through intimidation more than actual military superiority. Admiral Clark's response was characteristically direct. Then it's time to show this hegemony what real warriors look like. Continue gathering intelligence, Captain. When we arrive, we'll give them a demonstration of Deathworld tactics. Dr. Nina Ross spent the next several hours working with the alien medical teams. She learned that the three Alliance species had completely different biologies but shared one thing in common. They all came from worlds with gentle climates and peaceful evolution. The plant-like Verdani had never developed individual immune systems. They relied on colony-wide biological networks for protection. The aquatic Cetari had evolved in clean oceans without predators or disease. The crystalline Zephyrians grew in perfect crystal caves with no environmental challenges. All three species were incredibly advanced in science and technology, but none of them understood warfare as humans did. Their conflicts were resolved through negotiation, ritual competition, or simply avoiding each other. As Captain Morrison prepared his final report for Admiral Clark, he realized that humanity's role in this conflict was unique. They weren't just going to fight a war. They were going to teach the galaxy what it meant to come from a world that tried to kill you every day. The refugee fleet waited in space, hoping that the legendary Deathworlders could somehow defeat an enemy that had conquered 18 star systems without a single major defeat. Admiral Susan Clark stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 52 human warships appeared in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons designed for the harsh realities of space combat. The hegemony fleet was exactly where the Zephyrian intelligence had predicted. 200 enemy vessels surrounded 3 alien worlds, methodically bombing military installations and population centers. The Krex commander clearly expected no serious resistance. Fleet tactical display, Admiral Clark ordered. Fleet tactical. Officer Commander Ben Walsh brought up the battle screen showing both fleets. The enemy ships were larger but built for intimidation rather than actual combat effectiveness. Admiral, the hegemony fleet is moving to intercept, Commander Walsh reported. They're forming up in a standard wall formation. It looks like they want to show off their superior numbers. Admiral Clark smiled grimly. They think we'll be impressed by their parade formation. Show them what Deathworlders do to parade formations. All ships implement Wolfpack protocol. The human fleet suddenly scattered in all directions. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, the Earth ships split into small groups and attacked from multiple angles simultaneously. This was a tactic developed during the Solar Wars when outnumbered human forces had to fight against superior enemy numbers. Captain Lisa Park commanded the destroyer UES Ranger, leading a 3-ship attack group toward the enemy's right flank. Her ships were built for speed and hitting power, designed to survive the radiation storms and gravitational anomalies found near Earth. Target their command ship, she ordered her weapons officer. Full spread of kinetic missiles. The Ranger's missiles were simple but devastating. Instead of complex energy weapons, they were dense metal slugs accelerated to incredible speeds. They had been designed to penetrate the rocky asteroids that constantly threatened Earth's space installations. The missiles struck the Krex battlecruiser's shields and punched straight through. The alien commanders had never encountered weapons that simply ignored their defensive systems. The battlecruiser's hull cracked open like an eggshell. Across the battle space, similar scenes played out as human ships engaged the enemy. The hegemony fleet had expected a formal battle with clear lines and predictable tactics. Instead, they faced a swirling chaos of small unit actions and suicide attacks that made no sense to their military doctrine. Colonel Ryan Tucker commanded the Marine Assault Force from the transport ship UES Normandy. His target was the planet, New Eden, where hegemony ground forces were processing captured Zephyrians for slave transport. Major Steve Collins, take your battalion to the primary processing facility, Tucker ordered. Warrant Officer Amy Foster, your company will secure the refugee camps. Remember, these aliens are extremely fragile. Be careful with your weapons. The human landing craft descended through the planet's atmosphere under heavy fire from ground-based defense systems. The transports were built to survive atmospheric entry under combat conditions, another technology developed for Earth's dangerous environment. Major Collins led the first wave of Marines out of the landing craft. The hegemony had never encountered human soldiers before. The Krex defenders expected the usual passive resistance they had met from other species. Instead, they faced warriors in powered armor, carrying weapons that had been designed to hunt Earth's most dangerous predators. The human assault rifles fired bullets that could penetrate the armor plating of a Terran grizzly bear. Against the relatively light protection of Krek soldiers, they were devastatingly effective. The battle for the processing facility lasted only 20 minutes. The Kreks had superior numbers, but they had never faced enemies who attacked with such aggressive tactics. Human soldiers advanced under fire, used explosives in close quarters, and fought hand-to-hand when their ammunition ran low. Warrant Officer Amy Foster's company reached the refugee camps where thousands of Zephyrian civilians were being held. The crystal beings cowered in terror when the armored humans appeared, unable to distinguish between their rescuers and their captors. "Dr. Nina Ross, I need you down here immediately," Foster radioed to the Discovery. "These people are in bad shape and they're afraid of us." Dr. Ross arrived with a team of human medics and Zephyrian medical personnel. Working together, they began treating the injured refugees while Foster's Marines secured the area against Krek's counterattacks. The sight of humans fighting in conditions that would kill most galactic species quickly spread through both the Allied and enemy communication networks. Human soldiers operated in toxic atmospheres without environmental suits. They fought at temperatures that would freeze Krek's blood. They carried wounded comrades through radiation levels that were considered lethal by galactic standards. In space, the battle continued with increasing intensity. The hegemony fleet tried to reorganize into defensive formations, but the human ships refused to cooperate with conventional tactics. Earth destroyers made ramming attacks against ships 10 times their size. Human cruisers positioned themselves between enemy weapons and refugee ships, taking damage that should have destroyed them. Captain Jake Morrison brought the Discovery closer to the battle zone, using the research vessel's advanced sensors to coordinate rescue operations. His crew worked frantically to guide human assault teams to alien prisoner camps and supply depots. "Captain, I'm picking up massive communications traffic from the hegemony fleet," Lisa Martinez reported. "They're calling for reinforcements from 3 different star systems." Dr. Paul Henderson monitored the alien communications through the translation computers. "They're describing human tactics as impossible. The Krek's commanders are reporting that we're using weapons and strategies that violate their understanding of space combat." Admiral Clark received the intelligence update while commanding the fleet action. The enemy reinforcements would arrive within hours, bringing the hegemony fleet strength to over 400 ships. Even with their tactical advantages, the humans could not survive those odds. "All ships Phase 2 of Wolfpack Protocol," she ordered. "We're taking this fight to their supply lines." The human fleet suddenly disengaged from the main battle and jumped to hyperspace. The Krek's commanders thought the Deathworlders were retreating, but Admiral Clark had something else in mind. The Earth ships appeared deep in hegemony territory, attacking supply convoys and garrison forces that had never expected to face combat. Human hit-and-run tactics disrupted the enemy's entire logistical network. Meanwhile, Colonel Tucker's Marines continued their ground operations on New Eden. They liberated processing facilities, destroyed hegemony equipment, and rescued thousands of alien prisoners. More importantly, they began teaching volunteer fighters basic human combat tactics. The Zephyrians, Verdani, and Centauri had never been warriors, but they were intelligent and motivated. Under human instruction, they learned to use captured hegemony, weapons, and coordinate small unit tactics. By the end of the day, the military situation had completely changed. The hegemony fleet still controlled the space around the 3 worlds, but their ground forces were being systematically destroyed. Their supply lines were under constant attack by human raiders. Most importantly, their reputation for invincibility had been shattered. The Krek Supreme Commander sent a message to all hegemony forces. The Deathworlders were real, and they were everything the stories had claimed. The humans fought with a ferocity and tactical flexibility that the galaxy had never seen before. For the first time in the hegemony's expansion, they were facing enemies who refused to surrender, refused to negotiate, and refused to be intimidated. The war was no longer a simple conquest, it had become a fight for survival. News of the human intervention spread through the galaxy faster than Admiral Clark had expected. Intelligence Officer Lieutenant Commander Katie Brown monitored communication networks from across known space as reports of the Deathworlders reached every corner of civilized territory. The stories grew more incredible with each retelling. Humans who fought in radiation storms that would kill most species instantly. Warriors who survived direct hits from weapons that should have vaporized them. Soldiers who continued fighting with injuries that would have killed any other galactic species. Admiral, we're receiving contact requests from 17 different species. Communications Officer Tony Garcia reported from his station aboard the Defiance. They all want to know if the stories about Earth are true. More importantly, species that had been hiding from the hegemony for months were beginning to emerge from their concealment. The Ethereal Collective sent detailed intelligence about hegemony manufacturing centers. The Silicon Brotherhood offered to share their advanced computer technology. Even the mysterious Deep Void traders contacted the human fleet with offers of support. Dr. Paul Henderson worked with xenobiologists from the Discovery to study captured hegemony documents. What they found explained why humans had been dismissed as impossible by the galactic community. The correct scientific establishment classified Earth as a theoretical death world, he reported to Admiral Clark. According to their models, no intelligent species could evolve on a planet with our environmental conditions. The hegemony's own records showed their complete failure to understand human capabilities. They had cataloged Earth's massive predators, frequent natural disasters, and atmospheric conditions that were toxic to most known life. Their conclusion was that any species from such a world would be too aggressive and unstable to develop advanced technology. Captain Jake Morrison led combined human and alien teams investigating abandoned hegemony facilities. The enemy had retreated from dozens of outposts rather than face human assault teams. What the investigation teams found was technology that was advanced but designed for species from peaceful worlds. Their weapons are optimized for use against unarmored targets, Major Steve Collins reported after examining captured equipment. Their armor is designed to look intimidating rather than provide actual protection. Even their ships prioritize size and appearance over combat effectiveness. The psychological impact of human tactics was becoming as important as the military victories. Krek's garrison commanders were abandoning their posts after receiving reports about human ground operations. Enemy fleet commanders refused to engage human ships in close combat. Warrant Officer Amy Foster had established a training facility on the liberated world of New Eden. Volunteers from a dozen species came to learn basic human military techniques. The results were better than anyone had expected. The problem wasn't that these species couldn't fight, she reported to Colonel Tucker. The problem was that no one had ever taught them how. They're actually very good students once they understand the concepts. Former hegemony slaves provided detailed intelligence about fortress worlds and command structures throughout enemy territory. The humans learned that the Krek's empire was built entirely on fear and intimidation. They had never developed effective military doctrine because they had never faced serious resistance. Fleet Engineer Chief Patricia Brooks worked with alien technical specialists to modify their ships for human weapon systems. The combined fleet was growing larger every day as more species joined the alliance against the hegemony. The most valuable intelligence came from the quantum monks, a species that had been enslaved early in the hegemony expansion. They had been forced to work on the enemy's communication networks and knew the locations of every major hegemony installation. The Krek's homeworld is called Dominion Prime, Elder Speaker Varn of the Zephyrian Council explained to Admiral Clark. It's protected by 300 ships and orbital defense platforms. The Supreme Commander controls the entire empire from there. Lieutenant Commander Katie Brown analyzed the intelligence and developed a comprehensive picture of hegemony military strength. Despite their large numbers, the enemy forces were spread thin across conquered territory. Most of their ships were assigned to garrison duty rather than active combat operations. They're trying to control too much territory with too few real soldiers, she reported. If we can force them to concentrate their forces, we can defeat them in detail. Admiral Clark approved a new strategy. The human fleet would strike at hegemony supply lines and communication networks, forcing the enemy to pull forces from conquered worlds to protect their core territories. Meanwhile, human-trained resistance fighters would begin liberation operations on occupied planets. The plan required precise coordination between military forces and intelligence networks across dozens of star systems. Communications Chief Garcia established secure communication protocols that allowed instant contact between human commanders and resistance cells throughout hegemony space. Captain Lisa Park led a series of lightning raids against hegemony supply convoys. Her destroyer squadron used human-developed stealth technology to approach enemy formations undetected. The attacks were devastating because the Kreks had never developed effective convoy protection procedures. They expect their enemies to announce their presence and fight according to established rules, Park reported after destroying another supply fleet. When we attack without warning and retreat before they can respond, they don't know how to adapt. The psychological warfare campaign was equally effective. Human intelligence teams broadcast recordings of Kreks commanders describing their defeats to their superiors. The messages, transmitted on frequencies used by hegemony garrison forces, made it clear that the Empire's expansion had been stopped. Dr. Nina Ross established medical facilities on liberated worlds where human doctors worked alongside alien healers to treat former prisoners and wounded resistance fighters. The sight of Deathworlders providing gentle medical care to fragile alien patients became another powerful propaganda tool. The hegemony told their slaves that humans were mindless killers from a savage world, she reported. When they see us treating their sick and wounded, it destroys everything the Kreks told them about us. Colonel Tucker's joint training program expanded to include officer candidates from allied species. The most promising students were sent to human military academies on Luna and Mars for advanced education in tactics and strategy. The first graduates of the program returned to their home systems as the nucleus of new military units. They carried with them not just knowledge of human fighting techniques, but an understanding of why those techniques worked. The concept of fighting to protect others rather than for conquest was revolutionary for most galactic species. After 6 weeks of continuous operations, Admiral Clark received intelligence that would determine the course of the war. The hegemony was recalling all of its forces from conquered territory to defend the core worlds around Dominion Prime. They're finally taking us seriously, Commander Ben Walsh observed during a strategy meeting. But they're making the same mistake that every Earth dictator has made. They think that concentrating their forces will make them stronger. Admiral Clark studied the tactical displays showing hegemony fleet movements. 300 ships were converging on their homeworld, abandoning the conquered territories to protect the political center of their empire. They don't understand that we're not trying to conquer territory, she said. We're trying to end their ability to threaten anyone else. When they concentrate their forces, they give us the opportunity to destroy their entire military in one decisive battle. The stage was set for the final confrontation. The combined human and allied fleet now numbered over 200 ships, with crews trained in Deathworld tactics. They faced an enemy that had never lost a major battle, but had also never faced opponents who fought to protect others, rather than for personal gain. The outcome would determine whether the galaxy returned to an age of peaceful coexistence or fell under the permanent rule of the hegemony. For the first time since the war began, the aliens who had sent the original distress call believed that victory was possible. The combined fleet assembled at the edge of the Dominion Prime system was the largest military force in recorded galactic history. Admiral Susan Clark commanded 230 ships from 43 different species, all united behind the human strategy of decisive action against the hegemony homeworld. The enemy had transformed their star system into a fortress. 300 Kreks warships formed defensive lines around orbital weapon platforms that could destroy entire fleets. The planet itself was protected by energy shields and automated defense systems that had never been tested in combat. Fleet composition. Report. Admiral Clark requested as she studied the tactical displays aboard the UES Defiance. Commander Ben Walsh read from his data screens. 52 human warships, 68 Zephyrian Alliance vessels, and 110 ships from volunteer species. All alien vessels have been equipped with human weapon systems and their crews trained in our tactical doctrine. The plan was complex, but based on simple human military principles. Overwhelming force applied at the enemy's weakest point while secondary attacks prevented reinforcement or escape. It was the same strategy that had won wars on Earth for thousands of years. Captain Lisa Park commanded the first wave of attack. Her destroyer squadron would eliminate the outer defense grid, using a new weapon that had horrified even human military planners. The kamikaze drones were unmanned ships programmed for collision attacks against specific targets. Beginning attack. Run on the sensor platforms, Park reported as her ships launched their deadly cargo. Drones away. The unmanned vessels accelerated toward their targets with no concern for survival or retreat. They were packed with explosives and guided by artificial intelligence systems that could not be jammed or deceived. The hegemony's outer sensors died in brilliant explosions that lit up the darkness of space. The Krex fleet responded exactly as human intelligence had predicted. They moved to engage the destroyer squadron in formal battle formation, leaving gaps in their defensive lines that larger ships could exploit. Admiral Clark waited until the enemy was committed to their counterattack. All ships execute Thunder Run protocol. Target the command vessels. The main human fleet punched through the Krex defensive perimeter, using concentrated firepower tactics that had been developed during Earth's most brutal wars. Heavy cruisers formed attack wedges that focused all their weapons on single enemy ships until they were destroyed, then moved to the next target. The UES Defiance led the charge toward the enemy command ship, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the largest human warships. Admiral Clark had studied the intelligence reports about Krex psychology and command structure. If they could destroy or capture the Supreme Commander, the entire enemy fleet would lose coordination. Target their bridge section with kinetic penetrators, she ordered. I want that ship disabled, not destroyed. The Defiance's main guns fired metal slugs the size of telephone poles at incredible velocity. The projectiles punched through the enemy's shields and armor like they were made of paper, destroying the command ship's primary systems while leaving the hull intact. Meanwhile, Colonel Ryan Tucker's assault force was preparing for the most dangerous part of the operation. The liberation of Dominion Prime would require ground combat against an enemy fighting to defend their homeworld. Major Steve Collins led the first wave of landing craft toward the planet's surface. The transports were protected by fighter escorts and electronic warfare vessels that jammed enemy communications, but they still faced massive defensive fire from ground installations. We're taking heavy casualties, Collins reported as several landing craft were destroyed by surface-to-orbit missiles. But the beachheads are secure. The human Marines who reached the surface found that the hegemony had built their capital city as much for show as for defense. The buildings were huge and intimidating, but they provided excellent cover for attacking infantry. Streets were wide and straight, perfect for urban combat tactics that humans had perfected in dozens of Earth conflicts. Warrant Officer Amy Foster led her company through the slave processing districts, where millions of captured beings from across the galaxy were being held. The scale of the hegemony's crimes became clear as they discovered facility after facility filled with prisoners from dozens of species. Colonel, we need immediate medical support and transport for the prisoners, Foster radioed. There are more people here than our intelligence estimated. Dr. Nina Ross coordinated the evacuation efforts while human medics and alien healers worked together to treat injured prisoners. The sight of deathworlders risking their lives to save beings they had never met became another powerful symbol of the Alliance's moral purpose. The space battle continued with increasing desperation as the Krex fleet realized they were losing their homeworld. Enemy commanders attempted to ram human ships rather than surrender, but they discovered that vessels built to survive Earth's dangerous environment could absorb tremendous damage and continue fighting. Captain Jake Morrison brought the discovery. Close to the battle zone, using the research vessel's advanced sensors to coordinate the complex operation, his crew worked with representatives from allied species to ensure that liberated prisoners received appropriate medical care and transportation to safety. Captain, I'm detecting massive power buildup from the planetary defense grid, Dr. Paul Henderson reported. They're preparing to use some kind of planet-killer weapon. The Krex Supreme Commander had made a final, desperate decision. Rather than surrender, he would destroy his own homeworld and take the attacking fleet with him. It was a tactic that might have worked against any other species, but humans had faced similar threats before. Admiral Clark had anticipated this possibility. All ships, Execute shield wall formation. Protect the evacuation transports. The human and Allied fleet positioned themselves between the planet and the escaping refugee ships. When the hegemony's ultimate weapon fired, it struck the combined shields of 200 warships instead of unprotected civilian vessels. The energy beam that could have cracked a planet was absorbed and dispersed by shield systems designed to protect ships during solar flares and cosmic radiation storms. Several vessels were damaged or destroyed, but the refugee fleet escaped to safety. With their ultimate weapon exhausted and their fleet in ruins, the hegemony forces finally surrendered. The Supreme Commander agreed to unconditional terms rather than see his homeworld invaded by ground forces he could not stop. Colonel Tucker accepted the surrender of Dominion Prime on behalf of the Allied fleet. The ceremony was broadcast throughout the galaxy as representatives from 43 species witnessed the end of the hegemony's reign of terror. The prisoners will be released and returned to their homeworlds, Tucker announced. The conquered territories will be returned to their original inhabitants. The hegemony fleet will be disbanded and their weapons turned over to the Galactic Defense Alliance. The mention of a new organization surprised many listeners, but Admiral Clark had been planning for the post-war period throughout the campaign. The alliance that had defeated the hegemony would need to remain united to prevent similar threats in the future. The formal treaty was signed aboard the UES Defiance, with representatives from every species that had fought against the hegemony. The Galactic Defense Alliance would be headquartered jointly on Earth and the Zephyrian world of New Dawn, with humanity providing military leadership and the other species contributing their technological and scientific expertise. Admiral Clark accepted command of the joint fleet that would police the former hegemony territories and protect member worlds against future aggression. Colonel Tucker established the first interspecies military academy on Luna, where officers from dozens of species would learn human tactical doctrine and leadership principles. Captain Morrison and vessel leader Thys worked together to establish the first permanent diplomatic exchange between humans and the galactic community. The research vessel Discovery became the flagship of a joint exploration program that would map unknown regions of the galaxy. The final scene took place in the school systems of New Dawn, where human children learned alongside young Zephyrians, in classrooms designed for multiple species. Dr. Nina Ross had developed educational programs that taught both human and alien students about the diversity of life in the galaxy. The war had ended, but its consequences would shape the future of galactic civilization. Humanity's reputation as deathworlders had evolved into something more complex. They were still known as fierce warriors, but they were also recognized as protectors who would fight to defend those who could not defend themselves. Dr. Paul Henderson's final research report summarized the transformation that had occurred throughout the galaxy. Dozens of species that had hidden in fear were now openly traveling between star systems. Former hegemony slaves were rebuilding their destroyed worlds with assistance from the Alliance. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned that military strength was most valuable when used in defense of peace rather than conquest. The communication networks that had once carried desperate pleas for help now transmitted messages of cooperation and mutual support.